Great. Welcome, everyone. I think we'll just get started and people can join in a little bit late. But welcome, everyone, to the Product Roadmap webinar for the summer and autumn of 2022 with Handshake. We're excited to be here with you to share some updates. So before we start the webinar, we'd just like to go over a few housekeeping rules, very similar to previous webinars. First of all, everyone's going to be on automatic mute at the moment, but feel free to put something in the chat and tell us where you're from, tell us any questions you have, also in the Q&A section at the bottom right corner of your screen. And lastly, this webinar will be recorded, so don't worry about taking notes. We will share the recording with you after the webinar. And we'd like to just introduce ourselves as well. My name is Jeanette. I am the Product Marketing Manager at Handshake, and I'm joined today by two of my lovely colleagues, Claire and Mike. Why don't you say hi and introduce yourselves as well?
Take it away, Claire. Calling on you.
Hi everyone, good afternoon, lovely to see you all. My name is Claire Adams, I'm Head of Education Strategy at Handshake. Pleasure to be with you today.
And good afternoon as well. My name is Michael Harbaugh. I'm the Head of University Partnerships at Handshake. Likewise, very happy to be here.
Perfect, thank you. So today we're going to be talking about three main themes: how Handshake connects universities and students, how we are connecting university and employers, and lastly, some really exciting student updates because we are all about students. So I'm going to pass it over to Claire to first talk about the first piece here about university and student connections.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Jeanette. So as Jeanette alluded to, we're going to spend the first part of this product roadmap webinar focused on some of the tools that support you and your teams to connect with students and reach out to them and provide that kind of excellent service that you do. First things first, before we jump into some of the updates, I just want to thank everyone who participated in the advisory boards that we've been holding over the last couple of weeks and months, looking specifically at journeys and appointments, but also to thank everybody who more broadly suggested ideas that we could think about in relation to product development across the platform, in particular in relation to journeys and appointments. Your input is really critical in that kind of development and idea generation when it comes to the Handshake product, but it's also really critical in helping us to prioritize the ideas that we take forward and we bring through into product, because really without your input, it's hard for us to identify where we're going to have the biggest impact. So huge thank you to everyone who was part of those discussions or has fed into that process over the last couple of months. So what are you going to see start to appear in product off the back of all those discussions over the coming months? So first things first, hyperlinks in comments attached to appointments. So what this essentially means is that team members will be able to add hyperlinks in comments, both pre and post appointment, to essentially enable easier sharing of resources or signposting students to other services. This was by far and away the largest piece of product feedback we have had across the UK since going live just around 2 years ago. So we know this is going to make a really big difference to how you are working and supporting with students in those kind of appointments. So really excited to see that kind of come to life over the next couple of months. And I hope that makes everyone's life a little bit easier as well when you're delivering appointments. Second piece in relation to appointments specifically is custom messaging for no availability. So what this means is that as a career service, you will be able to customize the message that is shown to students and graduates when they come to the appointments page and there is no availability. And the sort of main, I suppose, driver behind this is being able to support students to either connect with you via another method or channel, perhaps directing them to some additional resources before they kind of speak to you face to face, if that's something that you want to do, or alternatively, if you just want to sort of let them know when availability will be released, this should really help with that communication. With all things to do with appointments, one of the things I do just want to point out with the work that we'll be doing over the summer, we will be investigating sort of additional usability updates based on the advisory boards, and we'll share more concrete updates on those as we sort of start to queue up work, which is why there's a caveat on this slide that there may be some extra pieces that we'll be able to share in the coming weeks and months, but it's really as we start to build out the roadmap and the engineers begin to dig into some of these issues that we can start to begin to scope out other pieces and other priorities as well. One of the things I do just want to call out as well, based on a lot of the discussions that we were having in the advisory boards, especially in relation to appointments, and this is for sort of wider context, is longer term at Handshake, what we want to do is standardise the way that scheduling works across the whole of Handshake. So that's for appointments, for virtual fairs, for virtual info chats, potentially in the future connecting alumni and students through virtual info chats, things like that. Given the complexities and the scale of doing something like that, standardizing across all of the scheduling capabilities across Handshake, that's not something we can do by the end of August, to be quite transparent with you. But that's something that we want to move towards in the longer term. And on this screen, I just wanted to show some of the scheduling tools that have been more recently released and other elements of the platform. So you can hopefully start to see how a standardized way of scheduling across appointments, virtual fairs, virtual info chats, things like that, will drive a better user experience for students, for careers professionals, for alumni, for employers, and also drive accessibility as well, which we think is hugely important when it comes to this kind of engagement activity on a one-to-one. So that's appointments. Moving into journeys, which I know is something that's incredibly important for lots of people on the call. So coming soon in the Journeys tool, you'll be able to filter for more specific student and graduate groups, including the stage of the journey that student is in at that point in time, and also the additional demographic data around that student to allow for more targeted messaging to students as they move through that journey, or if you want to nudge them through that journey, celebrate their successes, things like that. So we're really excited about that release, and I know that was a big, we came back to that topic to revisit in the advisory boards to really understand the need behind that. So really excited to see that get rolled out. You'll also have the ability to access Journeys analytics in the analytics tool, and also the ability to create and save custom reports as well, which we know is hugely important in relation to sort of measuring impact for Journeys and tracking outcomes and things like that. You'll also be able to reorder journey goals when you are building out or editing journeys. So just sort of improving that sort of usability function on the career service side. As with the appointments updates, as we start to work through the journeys updates, the product team and the engineering team have already got a sort of prioritized list of other things we might look at. But as we start to sort of add these items onto the roadmap, we'll explore where we can build in other pieces as well. So watch this space. As these pieces start to get built into product and roadmapped, we will let you know if we are able to indeed release a few more things before the start of the academic year. Oh, jumping around a bit there. So moving on to events, we know that sort of event strategies are a huge way that career services and universities engage larger number of students beyond that kind of one-to-one appointments or the digital kind of touch points that Journeys might provide. And certainly from listening to the sector and listening to our partners over the last couple of months, if not years, we know that the kind of hybrid delivery model is going to be the one taken forward by most people in the sector and our partners. So what we want to do is make that as easy as possible for you, but also for students as well. So for that reason, coming soon in the event creation flow, you will be easily able to distinguish between whether an event is in person or virtual. And if it is an in-person event, you will also be able to easily indicate whether that in-person event is also, it's also possible to attend virtually as well, which is shown on the right-hand mock-up here. So you can see there's a tick box that just says, you might be streaming this event and things like that. And so that event creation should hopefully make it a lot easier for you when setting up your events. But on the student side as well, it should support students to really be able to navigate more easily which are the events that are taking place on campus or in person, and which are the events that they can attend virtually, or indeed both, which have that kind of hybrid approach. Finally, for events, last but not least, I would say, as many of you will know, we launched Alumni Hub a while ago now as our first kind of step into supporting you to leverage those alumni connections, whether that be on the employer side or the student side. And so we've been experimenting, exploring different ways to support you to utilize that alumni community in a more kind of direct way through some of the other tooling in Handshake. And so some of the pieces that will be arriving soon, and these are very much mock-ups. So that's why there is a caveat on this slide that these are very much subject to change. As you can tell, these are very much early stage design mock-ups, hopefully. But what we will enable career services to do is easily invite and add alumni speakers to their events, which is shown on these two screens here. And then that will show on the student side as a featured alumni speaker. And what that will then pull through to into the events discovery experience on the left-hand side here, you can see that that top event, the KU Engineering Alumni Panel Discussion, you can see how an alumni speaker might feature. And assuming they've got their profile public and they've got those permissions and they're open to have messaging, that kind of thing, we may also then prompt students or allow students to message those alumni as well, to reach out to them to hear about their experiences or follow up and thank them for attending an event, that kind of thing. So we're really excited to see how this kind of the Alumni Hub now starts to extend into some of the other functionality across Handshake. So watch this space for more as the alumni event pieces come through. That's enough from me. I'm going to hand over to Mike to talk about university and employer connections.
Don't have any updates this time in the university and employer connections piece that's specific to alumni, but that's coming. So I'm really excited to be able to share that farther down the line. But yeah, in the short term, hi again, everyone. Very excited to share a few updates for you about our vision for how we're going to be able to improve the connectivity between the university and the employer, help you really kind of own that relationship and be able to drive more value to your students. So yeah, really excited to talk through this. And the first piece of this is this concept that we talk about a lot internally, enabling employer curation. Before I dive into that, I just want to kind of set the stage for when we think about curation, why are we talking about that? If you know anything about Handshake, you know that we're a network. You know that one of the core fundamental tenets of our platform is trying to increase access to opportunity. And a really big way that we think we can do that is by allowing students to see more opportunity, creating this flatter structure so that more employers can bring their opportunities to your doorstep. But with that comes the danger that students could get overwhelmed, that they won't know where to look, they won't know what to do. So what we want to do is, while we're building out that flatter, more kind of access built network, we also want to increase your tools as a careers professional to help guide students through it. And the first stage, the first step in that is what we call signal boosting. Some of you may have seen this, may have been part of this beta. If you were, great, I'm really excited that you've been able to help us kind of kick the tires on this tool. If you haven't seen this before, this is really part of our vision for how our platform can empower careers professionals to curate content so that your students really can be guided by your expertise. Like I said, it's easier for students to get overwhelmed by the multitude of options that are out there in the internet, but we don't want to shy away from the fact that internet has created, this network has created more opportunity. We want to embrace that in tandem with empowering you. So what this means is allowing you to take from among all the employers that are coming to your door through Handshake and put them into different collections that students can see and be able to kind of provide signal to your students about what might be a great fit for them. If we look at the next slide, we'll see that this is going to be integrated into the search experience that students have. So when they come to your university homepage, they'll be able to see these collections and see what's relevant and boosted for them. Some of the early experiments and kind of data that we've already gotten from this is really, really promising in terms of students being able to explore collections, click on employers employers and follow them. It's really exciting what we're already seeing come back to us. But really, just to double down on this, we firmly believe that your knowledge is what differentiates our platform from other job boards. This is validated by students as well. Research found that 98% of surveyed students were interested in recommendations from their career center. So what we want to do is empower you to leverage our tools to make sure that happens. Another way that we're going to be doing that, I don't have a visual of this right now because it's still being built out, but it is coming this summer into the fall, is the employer side sheet that many of you may have seen in some of the other presentations we've done, which will allow you to see aggregate data on location, job roles, engagement with events and fairs for every employer that you're working with. So trying to just bring to life more tools for you as a careers team to always see for any given employer, what is their interaction with our institution? And do I want to curate them and kind of boost them, shout them out, so to speak, to my students? So what does it look like for a student to click into one of these handpicked employer collections? If they do that to see that relevant boosted employer, they're going to see this collection here of different employer tiles that allows them to then click on and see that employer page. So that's where they can come in, then easily follow that employer. And in Handshake, what does follow mean? Follow means that I can now get updates and emails as well as push notifications when this employer posts a new role that I can see. So really trying to allow the student to kind of embed themselves into the experience a little bit more and be able to get synced up with that employer. This is just another stage in the process, one that we're going to keep iterating on. I really want to double down on this, that this curation piece is part of an exciting future of how we're trying to make sure that the career services professionals we support stay deeply embedded in every aspect of this network. When Claire touched on the ability to send links, hyperlinks out to students in comments, we see a future where you're also able to kind of easily share content, maybe even share connections between students and employers, students and alumni. That's all going to play a big part of this vision down the road. So what we're seeing here with these collections of employers is really a first step. And I have to shout him out, Gary. You're on this webinar with us right now. So I'll just leave this clip on the screen. But really, I think it's great to get this validation that that these types of signal boosting tools really do matter for making sure that all of the information in a network is accessible. One of the things that we hear all the time from students when we talk to them about what's terrifying about a job search on Google or on LinkedIn is I don't see things that are there for me and I don't know where to go, because it's really just the entire internet staring back at me. And what we really believe we can do in Handshake is take that same amount of opportunity, but place guideposts throughout the network and embed the professional expertise of our careers partners throughout to help students. So, and you also shouted out here, Gary, that we're building the ability to embed these collections into our targeted email tools, which is just going to be another way for you to surface them to your students. So really excited that it's already working for you. Now, and just to give a little bit more context to this, this is a kind of, if that's phase one, is creating those collections, and phase two is going to be putting them into the targeted email tools. In many ways, phase three is going to be finding ways for us to signal boost these employers, maybe with drip campaigns that we can partner with our universities to send out. So you can imagine seeing this mock-up on the right, we want to start giving recommendations, real estate, in digest emails that, and we've done a lot of research that shows that targeted digest emails that have the right content are really effective tools to get students initially engaged with your service, especially, like I said, if the content is personalized the right way. So we really think this is an exciting way that we can help drive student engagement as kind of a next step in this curation process. Now, that's all well and good. It's all very exciting, but whenever you're thinking about expanding access to a broad network like Handshake, that has to come with a lot of caveats. It first of all has to be done really safely. We have to ensure trust and safety before we start to expand access, or else we're putting students at risk. So I think part and parcel with every update we make in this network to allow for more connectivity and more access is this really important focus on making sure that it's safe. So I just wanted to pause and actually kind of maybe take you into the background a little bit of Handshake and talk a little bit about some of the things we're doing behind the scenes. So the first piece of this really relates to employer validation. In this summer, so coming up here pretty quickly, I hope everyone has their sunscreen ready, we're going to implement a new process where we can take on the onus to vet all employers and replace trust score. Now, it might seem contradictory for me to talk about removing trust score right after I shared a vision of how we're improving safety on our system, but actually this is an important first step. We first created our trust score tool, which most of you probably know, as a way to help university professionals take advantage of the expertise and context of their peers. It was a way to engage with aggregate data on an employer profile and see their general acceptance on the Handshake network and their ongoing behavior. But it's always been an imperfect measure. One core challenge is that many SMEs really struggle to grow and retain a high trust score. In fact, a lot of them end up with a low trust score. They end up getting disproved or declined by every institution, and it's a really tough situation. It's also easy for careers professionals to see a partially completed profile, an unfamiliar name, press decline, move on. The flip side of that is they see a trust score of 99% and think that is somehow a good fit employer, when really what that relates to is really just, are they a trustworthy employer? So we found that there's some issues with that signal, both from how it treats SMEs, but also how it gets interpreted. And the last piece is, frankly, there's a lot more information about Handshake and about how employers use it that we can bring to bear to actually, we think, improve on a lot of the kind of more rote reviews that are happening right now. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But just to dive in on the next steps here, and maybe just build this one out, Claire, go for it. Our timeline for removing trust score is happening as we speak. So in the summer of 2022, we're going to do two things. We're going to be implementing the signal boosting steps that I've already talked about to help our careers partners engage with those tools and provide more signal in the system. At the same time, we're moving to a system where we do all the employer validation in the system. What that means is that we're going to assess all new employers for legitimacy and monitor employers for fraud on an ongoing basis so that you don't have to. This is happening in partnership with a third-party firm called SIFT, and we're working really closely with them. They're an industry leader in doing this type of work to really understand whether a player or an actor in a network might be fraudulent. And we actually already have a lot of studies going with them to ensure that this is a really safe tool. I'll also say that every step we take when we think about opening up access to the network is a pretty cautious one. So we're not going to make any further steps until we've really taken the time to understand that SIFT and all of these new processes that we're putting into place are really working effectively. So, and I'd say the other side of that is that these are all going to happen in really close partnership and constant communication with all of you. It's a big shift. We're confident that it's going to add a lot of value and save lots of time for our career professional partners, but we're being very methodical in our approach nonetheless. The last step after we are able to deprecate trust score out of the system is going to be flipping employer approvals, essentially having your team only focus on declining employers you can't work with, but all other employers will be approved once they're validated by Handshake. Our aim is to launch this near the end of 2022, but again, we're staying flexible with kind of the needs as we grow and kind of get everything in place. And let me just double down a little bit on the employer validation. And talk a little bit more about this third-party partnership with SIFT and exactly what this brings to the table and how this really helps, because I'm actually really excited about this part. So first off, by flipping this model and working with SIFT to validate employers, this is going to save teams a ton of time. We've done some estimates that teams are spending over 230 hours a year just vetting employers that are being approved across the entire network. That is time that we really believe can be effectively spent elsewhere. But we're also excited that, frankly, this just adds a more robust layer of security to the marketplace. I'm going to really specifically drill into a few of these here. When we think about account takeover and we think about ongoing real-time assessment with machine learning, these are concepts in fraud detection that, frankly, no layperson and no career services team is capable of today. But SIFT and our system, we are capable of that. So we actually really think that we can bring the validation and the trust and safety themes to a whole new level. And one last thing that I'll add here, just to just paint this picture a little bit more. As we have developed this process with our trust and safety board, I want to be clear about what's not going away. There's still the ability for every careers team to flag an employer or to flag an action, flag a user, if there's anything the least bit suspicious or objectionable to you. That's always been one of the best pieces of signal that we get about whether we need to go individually review an employer, stay in there. So really what we think, the way that we envision this is really, we're adding a lot of complexity and robust power, frankly, to the trust and safety tools we have, but we're retaining all of the tools that our partners have, and that's not going anywhere. Which is all a lot of ideas to bring us to this visual of what will all of this look like. So if this is a little bit of a dud for those of you who know the employer page at Handshake, because you're like, wait, that actually looks a lot like what I have today. It's going to look a lot like what you have today. Functionally, what we're doing is we're replacing that trust score with the fact and the context. This is a Handshake validated employer. And so in this sense, I hope this like revamped review process, you can see it's not going to be necessarily a grandiose change, but I will provide some context here. It's important to note that one of the main tools that you're going to have, again, like they're not going anywhere, but you can see these new tools, employer tags on the left side. And I want to dig into those and explain a little bit more about kind of our future vision for how we're going to help you filter employers, instead focusing on not having to say for every employer, yes, 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 but just being able to practically go find the ones that you know are not a good fit and not acceptable for your institution. So if we drill into the next slide, we can see a little bit more visual of this. So what we're seeing here is kind of the next phase of this employer approval switch that I talked about a little bit. This phase of the journey is one we're on track to complete. Like I said, winter of 2022 into spring of 2023, we're trying to stay flexible there as we need to. But our vision is that once we've validated that we can effectively vet and verify employers, we'll be able to flip to a model, like I said, where each partner, you can filter and label employers that might need to be evaluated more closely by your team. Maybe they need to be blocked, maybe they just need to be reviewed. And what we've done is create a preset list of employer tags that we can then crowdsource and apply to employers that we know might be objectionable or might need additional review. So you can see from the visuals here that you'll be able to see employers who fall into these preset filter buckets and ensure that they get some extra attention and maybe get screened out. And I just want to quickly highlight, that was a wall of words and a lot of text for me. There's a lot of concepts in there, and I have a tendency to talk pretty fast about stuff that I'm excited about, which I'm sure Jeanette and Claire can both attest to. So if there are questions on any of that, we'll have time at the end. Feel free to throw them into the chat now. One of the big reasons that we talk about these changes to our network so much is because A, we're excited about them, and B, we want to be incredibly transparent and make sure that all of our partners know what's going on and are excited too. So hope to see some questions in the chat. And with that, I'll pass it back to Claire.
Jeanette, but
my mistake.
Thank you. We are all a team here. So thank you, Claire, and thank you, Mike. With that, I'm going to talk a little bit about student updates. As many of you know, one of the top values at Handshake is student first. As you can see Claire's amazing background on Zoom, student first. So with a lot of new student updates coming up, one of my most exciting ones that's being recently launched that I'm super excited about is this student peer-to-peer messaging. I was a student once, and I know that many of you or all of you have been a student once. When I was a student and I remember applying for a job, I really wanted to really understand beyond the job description, to really understand the company and the culture. So at Handshake, we already have that ability for students to have an informal chat with employers prior to applying to a job so that they can ask any questions that they have. But now when students really look at the job page and they see a company that they're interested in, they now have the ability to also see students that had prior experience working at that company, whether it's an internship or placement, and they would be able to ask a question about the company culture, about the people, and really find out if this job is the right fit for them. And we know that this is super important because from research, we know that this Gen Z generation, they really care more about values and aligning values to the company more than the salary. So this is going to be something really important to be able to speak to peers and find out about the job fit. Another update that we have coming up is about social diversity and social mobility. We know that from the Institute of Student Employers that over 70% of their members say that increasing social diversity is a very high priority for them, compared to only 35% in 2015. It is now 70%. So to address this increasing concern of social diversity, we are now introducing this optional question for students to self-identify themselves in regards to their socioeconomic background. And we are asking this question that's in line with the recommendation of the UK Social Mobility Commission to really ask students to identify the occupation of their main household when they were 14 years old. So this is completely optional and confidential for students, and we are making that very clear when students are answering that question. But this is very important that in addition to race and ethnicity, we wanted to make sure that we have equitable and inclusive hiring practices, and we have a very diverse workplace that's beyond race and ethnicity, but also with increasing social diversity. And the last but not least update that we have with students is regarding events. As you had just heard from my lovely colleague Claire, we are revamping also the events page for career services, but also for students. After speaking to many of you, we realized that students are inundated with a lot of different events, whether it's virtual or in person. And as a result, there might be a drop of engagement with events. And the solution here is that we are redesigning the experience for students in regards to events, so that now it's separating into the career services events and employer events. So they will see an invest in careers section, as well as a meet with employer section. And there's going to be new tags that really categorize different events, from advice to networking to academic resources. And we're still going through research with students to really understand what kind of tags and language works best for them and what kind of experience works for them. But the result is going to be more intuitive for students. And obviously, with this new hybrid approach and hybrid event setting, we're hoping that this not only increases the experience for students, but also increases engagement for students with you and employers. So with that, we are going to open the questions. So if anyone has any questions and who hasn't submitted anything through the Q&A, feel free to drop them in the Q&A section or the chat section, and we're happy to answer anything.
personally will feel deeply upset and emotionally scarred if there is not at least one question in the chat. Looking at you, Gary, or anybody else.
But we are also where we've given you a lot of information, and this will be recorded, so you can go back and review it, and we'll keep you updated. But yeah, we'd love a question.
Just kidding.
Oh, I missed. I think your signal dropped out then beautifully, or either mine did. Somebody did. Oh, we've got one. Gary, thank you. When students follow an organisation, are the organisations alerted? I think this is the case, question mark. Which one of my colleagues wants to take that?
I can take that one. I know that transparently, if the employer is a premium partner of Handshake, then they can view all of the candidates who have decided to follow their employer or have visited their employer page. And I think we do some digests to our core or non-paid employer partners as well to help them see that information. But I don't know the extent or the full cadence for that, Gary. It's a good question. We can take that as the next step and reach back out to you. Congratulations also to immediately stump us with your first question, at least in part. So bravo there.
And we've got a comment from Nick, which essentially says, no questions as such, but lots of notes taken and observations made with a little smiley face, which is lovely. Thanks, Nick. For the peer-to-peer messaging function, can students only message others from the same institutions who have worked at that company or also other institutions? I can take this one unless any of my colleagues, do you want to go?
Yeah, go ahead, Claire.
Yeah. So yes, the peer-to-peer messaging, the network is open to students from all institutions. It's about still up to student choice though, as to whether they are visible to that community. So students would be able to message other students from other institutions, but it is up to them whether they want to be part of that community. We put student choice at the heart of it, so it's up to them. But yes, they can message students from other institutions. No worries.
I also like to double down on that, Kate, just to say that a student making their profile public so that they can be seen by employers, or taking the additional step to be public to be seen by their peers and alumni, is totally optional. I know Claire just mentioned that, but I wanted to also double down that they can totally use our system privately and still apply to jobs in the system and do everything else to connect with the careers team. I think when we talk so much about having an open network, it's all very exciting, but I do want to point out that it's always one of those things where students get to choose if they want to be public in any way, and they can choose to be private too and still take advantage of all Handshake has to offer. That being said, about 96% of students do choose to be totally public in the system. I think it's because that's kind of what they've come to expect from these types of networks. That connectivity is part of the draw. So that's why it's so widely adopted.
Yeah. And I think to your point, Mike, it's also about making it clear on their profile, isn't it? And what we saw on the socioeconomic piece of which of this data is visible and who to. We try and make sure that is as clear as possible throughout the whole of the platform so that students can make an informed choice. Any other questions?
I saw Sarah raise her hand, which I thought was incredibly polite. Sarah, do you want to, I don't know if I think I have to allow you to talk, which I'm not really even sure how to do, but I'm going to try. Sarah,
okay, I think we just did.
And if that tech fails you, feel free to just type it into the chat or the Q&A. We can take it that way too.
We've got one from Gary in the meantime. Will collections be added to content in a custom email? I think this was mentioned. We could always take the links ourselves, but it would be nice to add the collections, like you can pick jobs and events into the email. Yes, so that's I think one of Mike's slides, which sort of had the one of the emails on. That's the sort of the next sort of stages of some of this exploration, is how do we then bring those employer connections into some of the other tooling, with emails being the one that we think makes the most sense. But we will test that with students to make sure, where do they feel this makes the most sense, and where's most likely for them to take action from. But certainly from our initial testing so far and some of our hypotheses, that we will be email piece feels like the logical next place.
And saw a question from Kate. Happy to reiterate this one. And again, sorry if I was moving a little fast. Tends to happen when I'm excited. The plan as of right now is for us to deprecate Trust Score over this summer. The exact date is going to be kind of flexible as we continue experimenting with and iterating on getting SIFT employer validation totally in place and like really structured. What we're actually doing transparently right now, Kate, is we're looking at every single employer in the system and running all the analyses that we want to put in place, and really just having a long timeline of making sure that those are incredibly accurate and are creating a safer network. Once we're really sure of that, we think we'll be ready to deprecate Trust Score. We're still trying to target July, but again, that date remains flexible and we'll keep everybody updated.
Yeah, and we will, as a on the education side of the team, we will be out with talking to all of your teams and offering resources and making sure that the teams feel comfortable in that. If you're heavily using Trust Score, which I don't think many people in the UK are at the moment too extensively, but we'll work with you to make sure that the teams understand how it's being replaced, what's there instead, and how to utilize those tools. So we'll be running retraining sessions, providing content, and kind of there with you the whole way, just like we were when we did the sort of other updates over the summer. So we'll be here on hand to support as well. Oh, great question about the collections. Jeanette, you might know more about this than anyone, but we've got the beta running at the moment, and we have, I think, 2 or 3 UK schools who, God, I've spent too much time with my colleagues in the US. I've gone back. Oh
no, our Americanisms.
It's rubbing off.
Just
2 institutions in the UK in the beta at the moment. Once that beta's kind of run its course, then we'll begin to roll it out across the whole of the network. Jeanette, do you know more on the timelines in relation to that?
Yes, the original plan is in July. We're potentially moving that forward to next month in June. So more updates to come, and we will definitely update all of our partners before they roll out to everybody.
I just wanted in closing to say that Claire is definitely going to give me grief later for infecting her her gray matter with Americanisms in quantum schools. So apologies to everyone. This is entirely my fault, and she'll make sure I know it.
I will. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go.
No, I was going to say, seeing as I don't see other questions, but if there are any others, great. If not, I really appreciate everyone's time today and attention and all the great questions we did get. We're excited to keep you up to date as all of this comes to fruition in the platform.
Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely day, and feel free to follow up with any other questions. Our team would be more than happy to answer them.
Have a great day, everyone.
Have a great day.